Well, good morning. Project today. Two projects today. Probably going to break it into two videos. We are working on a little Atlas compound assembly. Well, the compound and the lower or the upper portion of the saddle. So what we're going to do, and this is part of our Make Atlas Machines Affordable thing, I want to show a couple of parts we can build and that we can buy inexpensively and not be paying these big reseller prices and putting used garbage back on our machines that we're trying to improve upon. So what we're working on today is the pins that hold our compound on underneath our screws, and that's pretty much, I believe the Atlas compound is the only thing that uses these on the lathes. The 10 and the 12 will both be the same, and the 6 inches going to be similar. I don't know if they're exactly the same or not, but we're going to be, I believe, along the same lines. I've not looked at a 6 inch. So, but the 10 and the 12, the only difference to my knowledge on the compounds themselves, the only difference between the 10 and the 12 is this casting. This is a 10 inch, the 12 inch sits another inch higher and it drops down here. Otherwise, I believe all the rest of the components are the same on both machines. So let's get this down here to the bench. Actually, before we get this down here to the bench, I'll show you the materials I bought. So I went to, and I'm doing this because this is, you've got the same access to this as I do. I went to my local Ace Hardware store, which is 4 blocks away, with the idea of buying materials. I thought I can buy, there was 2 pieces of steel that I wanted and a couple of square-headed bolts, because I've seen the bolts that hold the compound on be offered for a fairly large sum of money, what I consider a fairly large sum of money. So for the pins, what I ended up with, and we had a limited stock, and this was my Ace Hardware. You're going to find the same thing at the big box stores in their selection of steel. So the reason I went there is I wanted to show you that you've got the same access to this as I do. Now, normally if I was going to produce these, and if I do produce these in any kind of a quantity at all, I buy all this material in full lengths. You know, I've got a steel supplier that I go to, so we pay less than this. This is fairly high for what this stuff is. So I bought a 4-foot length of 5/16, and they call this weld steel. This is not the plated steel, and I paid more for this than I would have the plated steel, but for this application I think it's a little bit better. And then for Gibbs, I bought another 4-foot section of a big 1/8 inch thick by 1/2 inch wide weld steel. So big expense. I've seen the pins go, I think the least I've seen them offered on Fleabay, about $10 a set for the pins. So my intent was to go and get a foot-long piece of each of these materials and show you how easy it was to do it and how inexpensive it was. I had to buy 4-foot pieces because that's the shortest they had in stock. Usually you can find shorter material than that, and if you've got another steel supplier, they've got it, or any of the online suppliers are going to have this. This is just standard cold roll stuff. This is nothing spectacular. The 5/16 by 4 foot long, I gave a big $7 for, and I can make how many sets of pins for that? And the 1/8 by 1/2 inch flat, 48 inches long, was a whole $5.99. So, and the big pusher screws, or the big, I'm thinking of something else now. The big square-headed screws, they are 3/8/16 by 1 inch long. Nothing special about them. That's what Atlas used. That's what they specify in the parts list. They were a big 99 cents a piece. So now the only thing that with these screws, and there's absolutely no reason not to use them, the only thing that I've discovered with these square-headed screws like this is usually they are hardened very, very hard. So if you try and set them up in your lathe and turn down a dog point on them, why, you may not have much success there. That's sometimes they'll cut fine, but usually they're pretty well hardened through, and that's fine. What I'm going to do on these is I'm just going to lightly chamfer or flatten the ends of it, and then I'll run it across my buffer to kind of polish the edge on them, because the very point of it is a little bit sharp. So we'll just flatten that out a little bit, smooth it out, and it'll work just fine. There's really no reason to have a dog point on these anyway. They just bear against the back of that 5/16 rod. So let's take it down to the bench. We'll tear this apart and see what we got. Okay, so here's our compound, and this is just one of those parts that I've had sitting in my parts drawer forever because I switched the other lathe over to production lathe. So when I bought parts for this, I probably bought a saddle that was complete that had this upper end on it. So everything's loose on it, but nonetheless, let's look at these pins on it. And all these is, like I say, our standard 3/16, and that one looks like it's been flattened out there. You know, you see a little bit of the nubbin in the center, but it's been flattened on the end. So that may be what's in both sides of these. So when you loosen those, now this one does have a little bit of a dog point on it, but like I say, and it's flat on the end. So for these, it doesn't make a bit of difference. Yeah, and this one's a little bit longer with that dog point. So whether this was an original one, whether it's something somebody else came up with, shortened up and put in there, I don't know. But nonetheless, that's all this stuff's been changed over the years. But when we compare them to a standard, well, see, this is the same length as my replacements, even with the dog point on there. So yeah, we'll just flatten these up. They'll work just fine. They thread right back in. Just like the originals would, or what was in there. And it's with these pins in there, why 1 inch just does it. They'll lock them. So there's our replacement square head bolts for those. So no reason at all to be given more than, you know, $1 a piece if you're sourcing them locally. You know, a couple $3 a piece if you're spending or paying to have somebody ship them to you. So that comes right off, and we'll put the rest of this aside because we're not going to work with it for a while. And our pins come right on through. When I originally saw some of these for sale on Fleabay, why they looked to me like they were a dowel pin or somebody's replacement. Maybe they looked like a dowel pin. Now these, I do not believe will be. Oh, we've got a couple of different pieces here too. One substantially shorter. This is what I normally expect to see, is just like that. So I don't know what the deal is with that one. Maybe that's what came out of a 6-inch lathe, maybe not, I don't know, doesn't matter. Anyway, this is the ones I'm used to seeing for the 10 and the 12-inch lathe, is just like this. And all that is, we're flat on the back end that we push against. We've got a bevel, which we've got I imagine that's a 60 degree, 30 degree, however you want to measure it. And all you have to do is match them up to that angle right there. That's all it is. So what I would do, and I'm going to say this is the proper length. It's about, well, if we make those 7/8 of an inch long. So with a 2-inch piece, we're going to have plenty. Let's make it out of a 3-inch piece, and we'll cut them both. Now, before I got too carried away, I guess I should have shown you, although I already knew the answer to this question. Our pins have to fit in to our compound. So when we slide them in, 5/16 fits right in there. So that will be just perfect for our applications here. And what I'm going to do is, there again, I just want to match this angle on our little boss here that's tapered. So what I'm going to do is just take it over to the belt sander, and we're just going to knock the angle down on both of those sides just so it matches. You know, we just got to match it so it's level there is all we're after. And then we'll cut them to length in the center and clean them up a little bit, and we'll be good to go. So let's go over. We'll see if we can't get these beveled. That's pretty much all there is to that. So now what I would do is while we're right here, and there again, can be done by hand, can be done on a bench grinder. This can be done with a file if you don't have either a bench grinder or a sander. Just knock off that edge a little bit, that sharp edge around the end. That way we're not going to raise a burr on the edge of it or have anything on the edge to cut in. And now I'm going to take those to the buffer and polish them down. There again, it can be done by hand. You can take a piece of sandpaper backed by a file and just smooth that up. But let me hit it with the buffer and smooth both ends out, and we'll go back to the bench. So there's our pins. Got both ends done, and it was just easy doing it with a longer piece. I think this started out as a 3-inch long piece. So now, what did I say the length of our pin was? About 7/8 of an inch. Yeah, let's leave it a long 7/8 of an inch. I think I'm going to go right back over to the bandsaw. There again, hacksaw will cut those off just fine, but we'll cut those to 7/8 or just a little bit more. Want to make sure we've got enough length so that we don't run out of threads on our screws there. But I'm going to go over, cut these off, and we'll be right back. This was our original pin, and here's our replacement pins. There's our bevels on them, just like that. They match our compound really nice. Very comparable to what we have. This is not rocket science. We can all do this in our shop. There's the back ends that we're going to push against. And I left these just a little bit long. If you were fitting them up for yourself, you can take the time to fit them down to where you don't have a whole lot of bolt head protruding. I also took our square-headed bolts and hit them on the belt sander too, and then on the buffer just to smooth them down. So we've got a nice smooth surface for them to sit on. And then reassembly. It's going to go on there just like that. And our little bevels go in and downward because they're going to pull it on down in tight. They're going to sit in there like that. And they're going to tighten in just like that. And once you hit them with just a little bit of a wrench, why, that'll lock them in place. You don't have to reef on these too hard. We're not McGilly Gorilla. At least some of you are old enough to remember McGilly Gorilla. Other one goes in the same way. Set our second bolt in. Locks in the same way. Clamp that down, and we have a new set of pins and square-headed bolts to lock them in place. Nothing rocket science here. If there's anything you've got questions about, certainly ask them. And if there's parts that are relatively simple like this that you'd like to see produced, give a yell. We'll see if we can't do something. The idea is to make these machines affordable again. Hopefully you found this a little bit interesting. Hopefully we can get these machines to where we can afford to have them in our shops again rather than paying these high-priced reseller prices or reproduction parts that are being really high-priced. So on things like this, you know, there's no reason to put used, wore-out parts back in a machine if you're trying to upgrade it or rebuild one, whatever the case may be. Stuff like this is quick and easy and cheap. You know, anybody can do it. It's readily available materials and components. So hopefully that helps us. Comments or suggestions, leave them in the comments section for me below. If you hadn't hit that subscribe button and this interests you, I'd really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch.